Do I
Hi,
hit?
everyone,
Do I
and
hit?
welcome to A Word with Kelly Scott Reed. I'm here with Mark SaFranko. Mark, welcome to our show. I appreciate you
Thanks for
being with
having
us
me.
today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I was really interested in when I was reading your bio and going on your website at the amazing amount of experience you've had in other
Hmm.
things other than writing.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Give us a little background on how you came into the writing profession, what you do with it, how it fits into your life.
Well, the first thing I ever did artistically was I was a musician, and I still am today. And you can find a lot of my work on all the streaming services. But later on, in my later teens, I started to get when I started reading. Dostoevsky and Herman Hesse and many different people, I started to have the insane idea that I too might be able to write, and it kind of gripped me immediately, and I started trying to do something then immediately in my early 20s, and I don't want to say how many years later it is, and I'm still trying to do something. So, but it's, it's been a long process of evolution, and there have been a lot of peaks and valleys in between. Um, and so I started from, I always felt that anything creative was the only thing that made me interested in life. Unfortunately, I had to do all these other jobs in between and sort of make my way through, which is what most of us do, I guess, if we're not. What do they call them now? Nepo babies? That,
Yeah.
that's what you really want to be, a Nepo baby. That's what you really want to be.
I notice a lot with the writers that I've interviewed that there is a vast variety of experience that
Hmm.
they've had. And
Right.
I wonder if you think that how you feel about that, how you feel that informs the writer. The more experience they have, the better, or
That's actually a really interesting question because the answer is that you have to be developing your craft and art at the same time as you're experiencing life. So I don't know. I don't think my my opinion is that it's probably not a great idea to say I'm going to work and live for 30 years and then at 50 I'm going to start writing. I don't think that's probably a great idea, but I'm sure for some people it works. But I think it's a very interesting tightrope act that most of us um, have to perform, which is you're living in one reality at the same time as you're living in another reality. And I think experience absolutely informs what you do, but you have to be doing the art at the same time as you're accumulating the experience. I think that's my
yeah,
view of it.
I would agree with that. I actually find it so hard. I went through such a hiatus from writing where I wasn't writing at all because I was so
Hmm.
busy. I
Right,
couldn't do it.
right.
But now, like the flood comes in. Now that I have more time, I'm starting
Hmm.
to glean all that.
Sure.
What is there a period of life that you write about more, that you draw from in terms of experience more than another part, another
Well,
time of your life?
that's a tricky question to answer. I do so many things as a writer that I might spend a couple of years on a novel that was set in my 20s and then uh, at the same time be writing a novel that's sort of set in a contemporary scene. So it just kind of it's dictated by my own sort of feelings, really. I mean, as you probably know, when you don't have to write something for someone else, in other words, as a job, you, your urges take you where you need to go. I think, like you've got this. I want to write this story. This story's got it was on my mind, or I've got this novel on my mind, or whatever, and then that takes over. And the answer is, I think is not, it's not very clear. I think, writing is a very, very messy process in as as you're doing it and in life at the same time. It's not a linear thing that I think is very easy to sort of like corral. I mean, if, for instance, I don't know if you write novels, but when you do revisions of novels, I find I do usually 10 or 12, let's say, and on every pass through the novel, a whole bunch of new stuff occurs to me to throw in or take out. It's a constantly evolving sort of process, for me anyway. I suspect it is a messy process for most writers. I would suspect.
So you've been writing for a while. Do you ever go back at your old work and not recognize it as your own work?
Well, I can see it's someone who is different from this vantage point, but I think at a certain point, it's not a good idea to look too closely. I would say, it's better to leave things in the past in a way because I on a couple of occasions I've had to go sort of way back and look at drafts of novels that I realized that I was a completely different sort of being at that point, and there was not much point in trying to revise the novel according today to where I am today. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah. So I think that's.
That's really interesting. And as you were talking, I was thinking about your novels. Is there a character in each of your novels that represents you, or do you have
I
no
think
representation?
there's a great quotation by, and I can't remember who it is right offhand, but it goes. I'm sort of slightly paraphrasing, but no writer writes about anything but himself. I think there's or herself. I think there's a great amount of truth in that. And yet you have to mold the realities of your experience into something else. That I think keeps your psychic interest engaged, because if you sit down and write like sort of a blow by blow account of what you're living, it's very boring to you, and it's nothing more than like a diary, let's say, which could be helpful, and but as a piece of literature, I think you have to transmute things to
Mhm.
make them interesting for you psychically. You exaggerate things, uh, you lie about things. I mean, it's fiction, let's say, even though it can be autobiographical fiction, which I do, just in a series of novels. But I think it's always there. I think it's always there. I think you're always writing about some aspect of yourself, and it can be surprising what comes up.
Mhm.
So.
Now, when you were beginning your writing,
Mhm.
your foray into writing, was there a particular author that really inspired you to
a
want to
lot
write?
a lot of them, but two principal ones for me that stood out were Henry Miller. This is back in the 60s, if you can remember back that far, and a Belgian author who a lot of people know, but in the U.S. is not as well known, called Georges Simenon.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a very famous um, a series of detective novels called Maygrays, but they weren't the novels that I was interested in. It was his other ones. They were called hard novels. They were without this detective, and they kind of covered the gamut of everything. But certainly, almost all of my favorite writers were non-Americans, or if they were American, they were only successful overseas, which is ironically what happened to me. That's
Really? Tell me
Yeah.
more. I want to hear about
Well,
that. What
that's.
happened?
I mean, my audience really is in Europe and the United Kingdom. The biggest part of my audience is in France, where I've been, published for I guess 14, 15 years now, and I've got like I think 10 or 11 titles out in France and Italy, and I have a couple of books coming out in Germany this year. So, that must have that sensibility must have somehow seeped through, and the Americans are, they have their problems with me, but it's more, I think but everything here, there's a different sensibility. Everything in the US is the bottom line. That's why you have celebrity biographies written by ghostwriters. I mean, that's what people are interested in. They're not interested in other. I mean, they're not. I don't think they're as willing to deviate from some concept of what makes literature as much as the Europeans are.
That's interesting. And you're also a
And the
musician.
French, and let me just add that the
Yeah.
French have a very, which is where again my biggest audience is. That's a train going by. So they have a very long tradition of taking American authors who are rejected in America, from Henry Miller and Hemingway, and there are many writers that the French will take and revere, and they'll be completely unknown in the U.S. Whether that's an act of spite on their part or advanced taste, I will leave you to decide. Because a
Let's
lot of people
say,
say that the French are always ahead of the curve with literary in literary.
yeah, and
So
a bit of a rebellious nature as well, I think helps.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Now, I was going to say you're a musician. I can't remember if it's a local band or a national band, but there's a band called Big in Japan, which is one of my
yeah, I
favorite.
remember. I remember.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't know their work, but I know that. Yes, I know
Because
their.
they were big in Japan and not
Yeah,
here.
yeah, sure,
No,
sure.
and I think of like the Tom Petty story of how he was huge in England before anybody knew who he
Mm-hmm.
was here.
Mm-hmm.
But did you have a moment in your life where you realized that language had power? Was there like a light bulb moment, or was it a gradual thing?
I think I always knew that it had power, and from the beginning. But now I'm a little bit more skeptical with the explosion of social media and internet. It seems everyone has it now, but but ironically, it's now diluted, diluted, because everybody has it. The other day I was reading a very interesting. Someone had written an article or said something about the internet, and they said, part of the problem nowadays is that everyone thinks they are special because they get onto their various platforms, and they're not special. Not everybody is special, but you are faced with this ocean of self-expression, and I'm not sure that language has the power it once did. And in fact, when you think of words that were, decades ago looked upon as vulgarities, not to be used in public discourse, every people say everything today. Every single aspect probably of people's private lives, and I think that dilutes something. I think it dilutes the power of language, and people's privacies being splashed all over the place kind of dilutes something about the mystery of a human being. You know,
Hmm.
I think,
The
so.
When you write characters, speak on that along those lines, when you
Mhm.
write characters,
Mhm.
um, do you keep a secret? Do you keep part of them secret, only known to you as the writer, or
You
it's
know,
all revealed?
you know what, I, I'm fond of saying that as soon as your pen hits the paper, it's no longer the truth. And that's a complex thought, but you cannot really tell the absolute truth about anything because too much goes into the absolute truth. So what you see on the page, even if it purports to be the truth, I think there are things that you can't ever really express in on paper. Uh, so Does that answer the question? I don't know if that answers the question, but it's an attempt at it. I think that, yeah, I think that it's very difficult to. The truth is a very, very elusive thing, let's say, and I'm not sure that it ever comes out. But then again, who wants to know the? I mean, do we really need to know the truth? I mean, right? I mean, that's another side of the question, really. Do we need to know the truth about something, or do we want to know, or do we want to be carried along by certain portions of illusion and delusion? You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
so.
I read a lot of lately, especially a lot of horror
Hmm.
lately.
Hmm.
Do you think, and my writing's really pretty dark, and I don't try to be, it just is what happens. Um, do
I'm
you
sorry,
think that
I missed the word there. I missed the word. You
my
said
writing is dark? Dark.
dark. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, do you think the genre chooses the writer or the writer chooses the genre when they write?
I think by virtue of what you are, you sort of what comes out, you gravitate towards what you naturally are. I mean, what you want to read is kind of what you end up kind of writing. I remember years ago when there were many periods when I was like in financial distress. So I decided to. I remember reading that women's romance novels, those like bodice rippers. They were, like there's a certain amount of pages in each one, and they paid $10,000 per book. And I said, well, I can try to do that because I've written for newspapers, I've been ghostwriter, I've done all this different stuff. I may as well try to do that. So I sat down and I couldn't get through like 10 or 15 pages. It wasn't in me. I just didn't have it in me. So I think that ultimately you're always kind of confined by what really is inside of you and what motivates you and what you like and love and what you need to do, really.
What is your writing kryptonite? What hinders your process?
Nothing. And I say that because from a very early age, I was living with this woman, and it was ex- you don't want to know I mean, it was a very, very volatile existence for several years. I mean, really explosive. And I actually astonishingly wrote two novels between like smashing crockery and disappearances. And I remember I always used to tell myself I'm never, since I didn't have any money, starting this whole mad pursuit, I said, I'm going to have to learn to work anywhere at any time for however long I'm able to, whether it's 15 minutes or half an hour or 10 minutes, and there can be explosions going off, but it's the only way I'm going to be able to work. So I don't really have a writing kryptonite, although I have to say, when I'm trying to work and people turn music up, it drives me mad. And it's not
Mm.
my music, and it's not mine. It's something else. That's sort of a kryptonite. But I mean, but there are ways to get around that with. So it's not really a kryptonite. But I think when you're driven like I am, I mean, when you're wired a certain way, you sort of work no matter what. And again, for myself, I consciously trained myself from the beginning to not I could not become distracted because I just didn't have the wherewithal to have a perfect environment. And I'm not sure that even would have helped so much. Sometimes I find that like if I have one half an hour, I get more done than when I'm sort of sitting there for a couple of hours. You know what I mean? I think that's because because
Mhm.
the temporal thing goes off and you realize you're limited and have to get a certain amount of things done. So, but I think for most writers of a certain stripe, they're you just get up every day and do it somehow, you know.
So speaking of, do you have a set time? Are you someone who you say you fit it in, but is it like, is there a pattern? Is there something that
Yeah,
you do daily?
I get up I like to get up in the morning and go to it right away to my literary work.
Mhm.
And then this is going to sound crazy, but since I no longer am working jobs, I then allocate. I start to get tired, and I put in like a full day, and I allocate like a couple of hours for painting. And then I eat, and then I spend the whole night on music. So I like go from like early in the morning, and I quit somewhere between 9:30 and 10.
Mhm.
But I,
Mhm.
but when you think about your day, I mean, I think most people, and this is even when, I had my son and was raising a dog. There's all kinds, and you're working a job. If you think about your day, you really have you have a lot of time that you probably waste a lot of time. Most people do. And I sort of like said, well, I want to do this and this and this. So I have to sort of discipline myself, and
Mhm.
I just,
Yeah.
and a lot of times I think I'm not doing a good job of it because I get, a little lazy and I feel like doing this but eventually, but ultimately I do, and it's the only way to accomplish things. You just sit there and do it.
Right.
It's a very boring life, the work, and it's
Mm.
really nothing but work. So, which is
What
why,
kind of
and
music do you write though?
I will just add this, and this is a very humorous thing. I remember just a couple of years ago, um, someone in the UK did a survey of what was the most desired job or occupation that people had, and by far it came out by far novelist. And I thought, wow, it is so boring to sit. I think people have a very romantic view of it, but you sit there, you know it's a very boring. I mean, it's interesting on the inside of yourself, but the
Mhm.
actual practicality of it is not very romantic. It's just work, 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 and hope you come up with something good at the end of the process. So
Could you give us, is anything you're working on coming out soon, and where can people find it?
yeah, well, this just came out. I guess this book of poetry that just came out from Anxiety Press. It's a book that I've worked that I don't consider myself a poet, but I wrote poetry over the years, and like spare some mornings I'd wake up and just have some idea to do it, and I accumulated this book full of poems over the years. So but I think it contains some really good work of mine. So, and I have another novel coming out soon from a company in Berlin, Germany, that was heretofore only available in French. It's called One False Step, and I have a two-book deal with a German publisher called Pulp Master, and the first of those novels is coming out this year in German. It's a very prestigious noir house with people like Charles Willeford and Derek Raymond, and some really very interesting sort of iconic names in the field. So.
That's
Um,
fantastic. That's awesome. Anxiety Press is a favorite of mine. Cody
oh, really?
is
Oh,
one
no
of,
kidding. I
so
don't.
our press is working on an anthology right now with him,
Mm-hmm.
with Anxiety and Outcast in a
Mm-hmm.
collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
a horror noir anthology
Right.
for the benefit of the Trevor Project. So
Right.
it's like a charity anthology, but
Mm-hmm.
he's just fantastic. I'm
Yeah.
glad you have that, and we're going to put that in the feed where you can find it,
Okay.
so that people know where to grab it.
And we only know each other across, you know, Gmail, the email. I
Mhm,
mean, I've never
mhm.
met him or spoken to him or anything, but he seems to be a very nice
I
guy.
spoke to him on an interview once. He actually interviewed me. So
Mhm.
he and Sebastian Weiss had interviewed our press,
Right.
Fantastic, but they do a lot of good work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's really done beautifully. Like the artwork is great.
Right. I
Um,
love the cover they did. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. So
Yep.
I'm happy. That's really cool. I think
Right.
that's
Right.
how I kind of found you, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for this
Mm-hmm.
interview was through Cody. I'm almost
Right.
positive.
Right. Right.
Um, but it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate it. And
I
hopefully we'll get to
appreciate you
talk
having
again
me.
soon.
Absolutely.
Um,
And
this
no, I
was
appreciate it.
great.
Yeah, we could talk for a long time. Maybe.
I
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Yeah. There's
it's
always a
rough.
lot to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. And
Thank you
and
very.
we'll see you soon, I hope.
Okay, Kelly. When will this be ready? Do you edit it? Or
This will be in 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Two
Okay, great.
weeks.
Okay.
We do it every 2 weeks, and you will be tagged in it, so you
Okay.
will know when it's coming out. And I also give you like a little email saying, "Hey, you're going to be
Okay.
out tomorrow, so look for it."
Fantastic.
I do my best with editing, but I
Right.
stink at it. That is not my gift.
Right.
But what we said is, again, we talk, and any glitches,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
it was great. I
Great.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your work.